The day Clarissa Doyle died, I made eggs. 2 yolks, a little salt, no pepper. I sat at the kitchen table in a silence that didn't feel like mourning. It felt like release. The kind of silence that lets you finally hear yourself think again. The kind that tastes like the first gulp of fresh air after years underwater. I didn't cry. I didn't make any calls. I didn't check the news or even glance at the messages piling up on my phone. I just watched the butter melt in the pan and thought, so this is what peace starts like. When the hospital called at 3:12 a.m., I didn't recognize the number. The voice on the other end said she'd been in a collision. Head-on. A beachside road, late at night. I listened like someone hearing a stranger's fate. The nurse kept saying, "Your wife," as though it still applied. Your wife didn't make it. She kept talking, offering instructions, condolences, questions about next of kin. I just said, "Her daughter will handle it," and hung up. That was the most honest answer I'd given in years. Clarissa died wrapped around Riley Trenton. I'd never met the man, but I knew his name, his cologne, his smirk from the photos on her phone. I'd seen the texts. "Meet me at the shore. I want to disappear into you." Or, my favorite, "He's still so boring. Still so gullible." She sent that one while I was at work finalizing the mortgage refinance that would lower her car payments. That same car was now a pile of twisted steel, the airbags blown like balloons over lies too old to forgive. Her wedding ring wasn't on her finger. They found it in the glove box. That detail was somehow worse than everything else. She didn't forget it, she hid it. Tucked it away like a costume she no longer needed. I imagined her laughing in the driver's seat, hair blowing, hand resting on Riley's leg while the world sped past. For a moment, I wondered if she was happy in those final seconds. But the thought passed. I didn't know her that kind of grace. I didn't tell Morgan. Not right away. She found out on her own, probably through Facebook or a friend of a friend. When she called, her voice was raw, ragged, almost childlike. "Is it true?" she asked. I said yes. "Are you going to help plan it?" she asked next. I told her no. Silence stretched long and taut between us until she hissed, "You're a monster," and hung up. I sat back in my chair and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. That voice, that accusation, that gall. Morgan had spent the better part of a decade acting like I was an inconvenience glued to her mother's life, and now she wanted my cooperation. It was almost poetic. Morgan could plan the funeral. She loved theatrics, after all. I could already picture her, hair pinned back, black dress clinging just enough to get compliments, a tissue dabbed against eyes that never truly saw me. She'd be the grieving daughter, the tragic victim. People would murmur about how young Clarissa was, how sudden it all felt, how life was unfair. No one would say the truth, that some deaths feel like liberation. While Morgan called florists and drafted eulogies, I contacted a real estate agent. I'd been waiting for a moment like this. Clarissa's death wasn't just a headline or a tragedy. It was the final move in a game I never agreed to play. I met the agent at noon, handed her a folder of documents. She blinked. "You've already prepared the moving paperwork?" I nodded. "The locks are getting changed tonight." Back at the house, I walked through each room with the kind of clarity that only comes after enduring too much. The bedroom still smelled faintly of her hairspray. Her vanity was cluttered with lipsticks and perfume bottles, expensive things she swore she bought on sale. The closet held more lies. Tags still on dresses, receipts hidden in boots, a half-packed suitcase with her initials monogrammed in gold. I didn't touch a single item. That wasn't grief, it was evidence. A museum of someone who once performed love but never truly lived it. I left her phone on the kitchen counter. I could have smashed it, could have thrown it in the fireplace or deleted everything. But that would mean protecting her legacy. Instead, I backed it up. Every photo, every text, every little betrayal cataloged in her cloud. Someday, if Morgan ever dared call me a villain again, I'd show her what her mother really sounded like in private. For now, it was enough to know I had the truth, and that I wasn't obligated to share it. That night, I changed the locks myself. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to feel the click of closure. I unscrewed the old brass deadbolt with calm hands and replaced it with a matte black keypad. Clean, modern, impersonal. The way things should have been all along. No more shared keys. No more shared anything. Outside, the porch light flickered once before going out. I didn't fix it. The darkness suited the mood. I sat on the steps for a while, sipping lukewarm coffee, listening to the neighborhood wind down. Laughter from a nearby patio. A dog barking. Somewhere, Someone was probably making love. Somewhere else, someone was crying into a pillow. And here I was, in the middle of it all, feeling something close to rebirth. Clarissa Doyle died the way she lived, wrapped in deception. And I, her legally bound spectator, had finally found the exit. No pity, no pretense, no more performing the role of the husband. She was gone, but I hadn't lost anything. I'd reclaimed it. I didn't mourn her. I didn't bury her. I buried the version of myself she built, bit by bit, with guilt and charm and silence. And that, I finally understood, was the real funeral. Clarissa walked into my life like she already belonged there. I remember the first time I saw her. She wore a red coat with buttons like coins and carried a book tucked under her arm. It was something obscure, literary, the kind of thing people pretended to read to sound interesting. But she quoted a passage from it, something clever and sharp, and I knew she wasn't pretending. She was smart, she was elegant, and above all, she was disarming. We met at a bookstore of all places, the kind with narrow aisles, and a cashier who barely looked up. I was browsing the psychology section, half looking for something to help me feel less bitter about my first divorce, half stalling because the idea of going home to silence again felt like surrender. She made a joke about Freud. I made a joke back. Her laugh was the kind that came from the chest, not the throat. Warm, not forced. That first conversation turned into coffee. Coffee turned into dinner. And within a month, she'd spent the night at my place more times than she hadn't. At 38, I didn't think I believed in starting over. Clarissa made me believe again. Or rather, she made me want to believe. There's a difference, I've learned. She talked about her past with an openness that felt brave. A divorce, a child, years of rebuilding. I nodded along, admiring how she wore her resilience like armor. Morgan's a good kid, she said one night, her head on my shoulder as we lay under my old comforter. She just needs stability. Someone who won't run at the first sign of drama. I remember how proud I felt when she said that. I kissed her forehead, promising silently to be that someone. We bonded over things that felt important. Books, road trips, long Sunday mornings where nothing had to happen. She'd sing off-key to 80s songs while brushing her hair. She loved strawberry jam but hated strawberries. She always put too much milk in her tea and claimed it was a design flaw in her English jeans. I thought I knew her. Thought I lucked into a second chance most men didn't get. But what I didn't realize, what I couldn't let myself see, was that Clarissa wasn't sharing. She was performing. Every compliment was a hook. Every story was a stage. Her past wasn't a burden. It was a script. And I played the role she'd written for me with devotion. I was the good man, the stable one, the contrast. She needed me to be steady so she could continue being the whirlwind. I provided the grounding so she could justify her chaos. That's the dance she knew best. She introduced me to Morgan on our fourth date. I just want her to see how serious this is, she said. I took it as a sign of trust. Morgan was 15 then. Sharp eyes, a dismissive tilt to her head, already fluent in the art of adolescent judgment. She didn't smile when she shook my hand, just asked if I was the reason her mom started humming again. Clarissa laughed and said, "He's the reason I don't hate Thursdays anymore." It felt playful at the time. Looking back, it was more like foreshadowing. When I proposed, I did it with a small ring and a big heart. On a balcony overlooking Lake Michigan. She cried, said yes, said, "You make me feel seen." I clung to those words like they were sacred. I told myself they mattered. But what she really meant was, "You see what I want you to see." The honeymoon was where the mask started to slip. We were in Napa. A bed and breakfast with no cell service and a bathroom sink shaped like a wine barrel. The air smelled like lavender and fermentation. One night, I came out of the shower and overheard her on the phone with Morgan. I stood in the hallway, just around the corner, hearing words I wasn't supposed to. "No, sweetie, he's fine. A little bland, maybe. But he's stable. We need that." Then came Morgan's reply, casual and sharp like broken glass. "A spare wallet's still a wallet, right?" I waited for Clarissa to correct her, to scold her, to remind her that I wasn't just some bank account. But instead, Clarissa laughed. Laughed like it was the most harmless joke in the world. When I walked back into the room, her voice switched like a light, sweet, affectionate, full of artificial sugar. I didn't confront her. I told myself I'd misunderstood, that I was tired, that humor was how they bonded. I didn't want to rock the boat. I was already too far in. But that was the second lie, the first being that I was better than Morgan's real father. I would come to learn that there was no father worth comparing to. He'd left early, and Morgan had grown up watching her mother cycle through relationships the way most people cycle through kitchen sponges. Bright, useful, but disposable. I thought I'd be different. Clarissa made me believe I was. The months after the wedding blurred into a rhythm of compromises. Morgan's disrespect was chalked up to teenage moodiness. Clarissa's spending habits became part of her artistic process. Every time I raised a concern, it got spun into evidence that I was too rigid, too critical, not romantic enough. I started to shrink myself down, inch by inch, until I barely recognized the man in the mirror. I stopped arguing, stopped asking questions. I focused on work, paid the bills, played the role. That's the thing about being with someone who weaponizes charm. You don't see the bruises until you've healed. You think you're paranoid. You second-guess your instincts. Clarissa was never violent, but she bled me dry in smiles and softness. Her lies weren't screamed. They were whispered between kisses. She told me I was her anchor, all while sailing off in every direction. And I let her. God help me, I let her. I remember the night I sat alone in the guest room, the door closed, her laughter echoing faintly down the hall from some movie she was watching with Morgan. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning like a slow, mocking clock and finally said the words out loud. I don't think she loves me. It wasn't anger I felt. It was loss. The slow realization that I had mistaken performance for partnership. That I had married a woman who needed an audience more than a companion. Still, I stayed. I convinced myself it would change. That time, maturity, shared history, something would realign us. But love, real love, isn't built on illusions. It's built on accountability, sacrifice, and truth. And Clarissa had no use for those. She captivated me once. And for that, I gave her everything. I just didn't know I was paying to be part of her show. The day we moved into the new house, I carried Morgan's boxes up to her room while she scrolled on her phone and called out where things should go without ever looking at me. Books on the shelf. Clothes in the closet. That box has got shoes. Don't mess it up. No thank you. No smile. Just orders. Clarissa walked in halfway through and kissed my cheek. Isn't he sweet? She said to Morgan. You've got a stepdad who actually lifts boxes. Morgan didn't respond. She barely looked up. I remember laughing a little, pretending it didn't sting. But that was the first moment I felt it, the cold edge of being tolerated in my own home. She was 16. That complicated age where everything felt like a performance and rebellion was currency. I told myself it was just a phase. She'd come around. All she needed was consistency, patience, stability, and I was good at those things. My job demanded it. My life, before Clarissa, had been a temple to routine. I believed effort always paid off. That belief nearly ruined me. I paid for her therapy sessions after she got caught shoplifting designer perfume from a boutique downtown. Clarissa said it was a cry for attention. Morgan said it was an experiment. I said it was a mistake and offered to help her get a part-time job to earn her own money. That suggestion got me a slammed door and a week of icy silence. Clarissa said, "Don't push her. She's going through a lot." As if I wasn't. Morgan never called me by my name. Not Felix. Not Dad. Not even a half-hearted mister. She called me him, he. Or worse, the help. Ask the help what time dinner is, she once said in front of her friends. Clarissa was nearby, heard it, and didn't flinch. I remember turning to look at her, waiting for a correction, a defense, a flicker of concern. But she just offered a smile, the kind that was tied around the edges, and said, "She's joking, babe. Don't be so sensitive." Sensitive. That word started to follow me around the house like a shadow. I tried harder. I coached Morgan through her college applications, staying up late to proofread essays she never thanked me for. I paid for her campus visits, even though she rolled her eyes through most of them. I bought her a car when she got accepted, used, but clean and reliable. She took the keys without a word, not even a glance back as she drove off. Clarissa cried tears of joy and said, "You've done more for her than her father ever did." But when I looked at Morgan that day, I knew I hadn't earned even an ounce of respect. Just expectation. And expectation turned into entitlement. Morgan raided the fridge like it was her birthright, borrowed Clarissa's credit card whenever she wanted, and treated the cleaning lady like a ghost. She made digs at me constantly about my clothes, my hobbies, my boring job. I worked in software contracts. Stable income, good benefits. It paid for her tuition, her car insurance, and the new countertops Clarissa just had to have. But to Morgan, I was a walking paycheck with zero value outside my wallet. Clarissa never told her no. Not once. She's still adjusting. She'd whisper whenever I brought up boundaries. Let her find her own rhythm. That rhythm involved late nights, broken curfews, and friends I didn't recognize showing up in our house unannounced. One night, I walked into the kitchen at midnight and found a guy easily in his 20s raiding the pantry. "Who are you?" I asked. He laughed and said, "Morgan's friend." She said it's cool. Clarissa was asleep. Morgan was upstairs. I asked him to leave. The next morning, I was the bad guy. "Why are you always so aggressive?" Morgan spat at me. Clarissa nodded quietly beside her, as if conflict exhausted her too much to pick a side. Every day, I felt myself retreating a little more. I stopped sitting in the living room. It became her domain. TV volume up, shoes kicked off, friends over without warning. I moved my reading to the garage. I started eating later, after they were done. I let the little indignities slide because I thought enduring them was proof of love. But all I was doing was disappearing, dying by degrees in my own house. The lowest moment came on my birthday. I'd taken the day off. I baked a lemon cake, my favorite, not that anyone else remembered. I waited at the table, thinking we'd have dinner together. Clarissa walked in late, talking loudly on the phone, and gave me a distracted kiss on the cheek. "We'll do something this weekend, okay?" Morgan had a rough day. Morgan never showed. She was out with friends. Clarissa brought me a bottle of wine I didn't like and said, "Don't pout. You're a grown man." I didn't even get a card. From that point on, I stopped pretending. I started counting. Counting the receipts I kept hidden in my desk drawer. Counting the credit card statements with mystery charges. Counting the number of times Morgan called me useless in a single week. 5. The record was 5. I wrote it down on a napkin and tucked it behind my passport. One afternoon, I walked past the upstairs bathroom and heard them laughing behind the door. Clarissa and Morgan. "He doesn't even notice anymore," Morgan said between giggles. "He just stares at spreadsheets like a robot." Clarissa's laugh was low, conspiratorial. "That's why he's safe. He doesn't ask questions." I stood there for a full minute, listening to the two people I fed, clothed, and cared for treat me like a pet, like some neutered thing they let roam the house. I realized then I wasn't a man to them. I was a placeholder, a service provider with no dignity. And worst of all, I had let it happen. I had let love blind me, let duty strip me, let silence bury me. From the outside, we looked like a perfect blended family. The smart, artistic wife, the spunky daughter in college, the reliable stepfather who never lost his temper. But inside, our house was a kingdom ruled by entitlement, and I was the jester, tolerated, laughed at, but never respected. And when you live long enough in a home where your value is measured by how quietly you endure, you eventually become a stranger to yourself. I used to be confident. I used to be funny. I used to have a name. Now, I was just the help. And I knew, one day soon, I'd stop helping. Clarissa always made money feel like something she didn't need to understand. In the early days, I mistook it for elegance. She'd glance at price tags like they were beneath her, toss receipts without reading them, talk about investing in experiences whenever the bill at a restaurant made me blink twice. "It's just money," she'd say, swirling her wine. "We'll make more." Except we didn't make more. I did. I covered the mortgage, the utilities, the car notes, hers and Morgan's, the groceries, the gas, the streaming services, the boutique cleaning service Clarissa insisted on hiring because good help should be rewarded, though she never rewarded me for cleaning up after the messes her daughter left everywhere. I paid for the roof over our heads and the hardwood floors beneath our feet. Clarissa played the role of the designer wife, doing a few side gigs here and there. Small consultations, color palettes for her old college friends. I saw the invoices. Sometimes she got paid. Sometimes she didn't. But every time, she'd come home with shopping bags. At first, I didn't mind. I'd been single for so long that sharing felt good. I liked giving. I liked being needed. But slowly, subtly, that generosity turned into expectation. The more I gave, the less it mattered. Clarissa stopped saying thank you. Morgan never started. They lived like the credit card was an inheritance, not an obligation. I tried talking to Clarissa about it once, just once. "We need to scale back," I said one night, sitting across from her in our softly lit kitchen. Morgan's tuition is increasing next year. The refinance helped, but I'm stretched thin. She looked at me like I'd asked her to sell a kidney. Felix, she said, I've already scaled back. I didn't get that Paris booking last month. I'm working with what I have. You're not working, Clarissa, I said. You're spending. She pushed her chair back with a sigh, stood up, and poured herself another glass of wine. Why do you always make this about numbers? We're building a life. You knew what you were signing up for. That's the thing. I thought I did, but I didn't know I was signing up to be drained in installments. Then came the conversation about the house. It was late October. The trees out front had just started shedding red and orange across our walkway. Clarissa had just come home from what she called a wellness retreat with 2 of her designer friends, really a spa weekend where they drank cucumber water and posted filtered selfies. She sat on the couch, freshly tanned, barefoot, sipping herbal tea. I was thinking, she began casually, maybe we should split the deed. I blinked. Split it? Yeah. You know, both our names on the title, just in case anything ever happens. It's a protection move. For both of us. She said it so smoothly. So earnestly. I stared at her, trying to decode what she wasn't saying. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask for time to think. I just nodded. Because after years of trying to keep peace, I learned that hesitation was treated as hostility. A month later, the deed was split. I went to the county office with her, signed the forms, and watched her beam like we were renewing vows. That was the same month I noticed the first of the new credit card statements, one I didn't recognize. It was in my name. The limit had been maxed. I called the card company. They said it was opened 6 months ago, an online application, approved instantly, charges beginning 3 weeks after. The address, the number, even the signature, they all matched my records. It was perfect forgery. Sir, the woman on the phone said, the charges appear to be household related. It wouldn't be considered fraud unless you're reporting identity theft. I wasn't. I was reporting betrayal. When I confronted Clarissa, she didn't flinch. She reached for the card like it was a receipt I was making too much noise about. It's all one household, she said, sipping that same wine. What's the big deal? The big deal, I said, is you opened this in my name. You forged my signature. You spent over $20,000 and you're acting like I misplaced a sock. She smiled. It's not forgery. It's trust. Besides, we both live here. It's not like I'm buying yachts. It's spa visits, groceries, Morgan's books. You act like I'm robbing you. You are, I thought. Every day, in ways so calculated and clean they almost don't leave a trace. But I didn't say that. Not out loud. I stood there, heart pounding, and I realized she was testing the limits of how far I'd been. That's when I started documenting. Quietly, carefully. I saved every receipt. I printed every statement. I created backup drives. I installed a camera in the study under the pretense of home security. I kept my voice calm, my steps light. I said nothing. I planned. I recorded phone calls. Just a few. Whenever she hinted at splitting finances or shifting funds, I turned on the app. Her voice, sugary and strategic, filled those recordings. We should refinance again. Maybe take out a second line. There's equity. Might as well enjoy it. She said things like that with the same voice she used when ordering curtains. I also found out she'd listed me as a co-signer on Morgan's emergency student loan. I didn't sign a thing. But there it was, buried under her college financial aid paperwork. My name. My credit score. No signature, just an electronic checkmark someone else made. I didn't even get angry. I just added it to the file. I stopped sharing my passwords. I opened a new bank account under a different financial institution. Rerouted my direct deposit. I let them keep spending from the old joint account until it had just enough left for groceries and gas. When Clarissa asked why the balance seemed low, I said I'd been helping out my brother, another lie to feed the nest of lies we already lived in. By the end of that year, I had a binder an inch thick with evidence. I stored it at work, inside a locked drawer, under a stack of old user manuals. I scanned every page. Had backups on 3 drives, one of which I mailed to a friend in Colorado just in case anything ever happened. Not because I was scared, but because I wasn't going to be blindsided again. I started walking around the house differently, eyes open, ears sharper, noticing how Clarissa treated me like a prop, how Morgan rolled her eyes like I was interrupting her day just by existing. I noticed everything, because now I wasn't living with them, I was documenting them, gathering proof. laying the bricks for my exit. All I needed was the right moment. And then it came, wrapped in a late-night phone call. Headlights off the side of the road. A voice on the line telling me my wife was gone. And I didn't cry. I was already gone too. The knock at the door came just after 2 a.m., the kind of hour when you know nothing good is waiting on the other side. I was still awake. Couldn't sleep. Not because I sensed anything. No. I was reviewing my financial exit file again, cataloging every debt Clarissa had created, every silent theft. I'd become meticulous over the last year, saving, scanning, preparing. Not for her death. For my escape. But life has a cruel way of rewriting your plans. I opened the door to two officers in uniform, somber expressions already giving me the ending before the words arrived. "Are you Felix Doyle?" one asked. I nodded. "Your wife, Clarissa Doyle, was involved in a fatal accident. A single-vehicle collision just outside Ridgeview. We're sorry for your loss." Loss. That word. They said it like I'd been robbed of something precious. But in that moment, I felt no collapse. No scream clawing its way out of my chest. No disbelief. Only a kind of weightless stillness, as if my body hadn't decided yet whether to be shocked or relieved. I asked no questions. They offered no details beyond the standard. I thanked them, closed the door, and stood in the dark hallway of the house we built, if you could call what we had built anything but a cage. I waited for the grief to show up. Waited for the gut punch, the trembling hands, the tears. Nothing. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood at the sink staring out at the yard. The porch light flickered, the last bulb I hadn't changed. Clarissa always said it made the house feel lived in. But I never felt alive here. Not really. I was tolerated. Used. Smoothed into someone forgettable for the sake of maintaining her fantasy of love. The next morning, I got the call from the hospital. They asked if I'd come collect her personal effects. I said yes, but I took my time. I showered, shaved, made a full breakfast. When I finally drove to the hospital, the bag they handed me was too light. A phone, her wallet, lip balm, no ring. She wasn't wearing one? I asked, though I already knew. The nurse gave a polite nod. It was found in the glove box. We thought maybe it was removed post-impact, but it wasn't. I took the phone and left without ceremony. In the parking lot, I just sat in the car, staring at that screen. The lock code, of course, hadn't changed. Clarissa wasn't cautious, just confident. That arrogance was threaded into everything she did. Her secrets were never hidden, they were camouflaged by charm. The text messages were still open from that night. The last conversation was with Riley. "I can't wait to see you," she'd written at 7:42 p.m. "He thinks I'm at that interior design conference." The man would believe a toaster if it told him I was working. A photo followed. Her in a hotel robe. Glass of wine in one hand. Lips pursed in a kissy face. No ring. No trace of the life we supposedly shared. I scrolled. Messages from weeks, months. Hotel bookings. Reservations. Screenshots of beach resorts. One thread read, "The sex is better when it's forbidden. He's so predictable. Sometimes I pretend he's a ghost." Another message, from Riley, responded, "He kind of is, isn't he? Walking ATM. But I'll make you forget his name this weekend." That's when it happened. My hand didn't shake. My jaw didn't clench. I just sat there, quiet. A kind of numbness that felt surgical, like someone had lifted a tumor I didn't know I'd been carrying. I closed the phone, placed it in the passenger seat, and drove home in complete silence. The road ahead felt strange. Empty, but wide. Like maybe, just maybe, I'd reached the end of something long overdue. Back at the house, I placed the phone on the dining table and sat across from it. Like I was staring down a truth I'd been dodging for years. The photo of Clarissa and Riley at the resort blinked back at me from the screen. Her smile was real. Her body relaxed. Not the way she was around me. With me, it had become duty. An act. Something tight and performative. I hadn't seen her laugh like that in years. That was the part that hit hardest. Not that she'd cheated. Not that she'd lied. But that the version of her I thought I loved had never really been mine. I'd been planning my exit for months. Setting up new accounts. Untangling my name from the debts. I thought I'd have to fake a business trip, slowly clear out my belongings, leave a note if I was feeling generous. I never considered that fate might accelerate my escape. I should have felt conflicted. But instead, I felt ready. I emailed Morgan later that night. Simple. Blunt. Your mother passed away in a car accident last night. I've collected her personal effects. You can handle funeral arrangements. She replied an hour later with a barrage of exclamation points and accusations. What do you mean I can handle it? You're her husband. And then, don't you dare disappear now. We need to talk. I'm calling tomorrow. I muted her number. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. Clarissa was gone, and whatever role she'd written for me in her life's performance, I was officially stepping off stage. I spent the next 3 days clearing my name from every joint account. The house? Already quietly transferred to my name alone the year before, thanks to her own distracted signature during a refinance. The paperwork had been filed, recorded, notarized. She never asked questions. She trusted that I was as passive with the law as I'd been with her affections. That arrogance gave me freedom. I canceled all remaining credit cards, froze the joint lines, logged into her laptop and downloaded all emails. Not out of vengeance, out of insurance. When people like Morgan find out they were cut out, they rewrite history. I wasn't giving her the pin. A few friends reached out when they heard. Texts like, "So sorry, man. You okay?" I replied to none of them. Because no one really knew what Clarissa had become. Or worse, what I'd let myself become beside her. On the 4th day, I packed her phone, ring, and wallet into a small box. I left it on the porch with a note. For Morgan. Handle with care. I didn't wait to see if she picked it up. I didn't care if she threw it in the trash or framed the damn thing. I only knew one thing with certainty. I was free. And freedom, it turns out, doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like breath. Like standing still in your own house and realizing you no longer have to apologize for taking up space. Clarissa's death wasn't a tragedy. It was an ending. And finally, mine had begun. The morning of the funeral, I woke to sunlight spilling through the windows like it didn't know what kind of day it was supposed to be. I sat up in bed and stared at the ceiling for a while, letting the silence drape over me like a blanket I didn't ask for but wasn't ready to shake off. Downstairs, the moving boxes were already stacked in neat rows, labeled in my handwriting. Office, tools, personal files, leave it. I made coffee, black, no sugar, and stared out the kitchen window while it brewed. The neighborhood was still quiet. No signs of mourning. Just Tuesday. My phone rang around 9:17 a.m. I let it ring until it stopped. It rang again immediately. Morgan. I finally answered. Where the hell are you? She demanded. Her voice sounded hoarse, like she'd already been crying or screaming or both. They're seating people. The minister already asked for you twice. Are you seriously doing this right now? I sipped my coffee, steadying my breath. I'm not coming, Morgan. What? She hissed. I'm not coming, I repeated. Handle it. You're 24. You wanted to be in charge? This is what that looks like. You're her husband, she spat. You owe her this. I stared out at the hedge Clarissa made me trim every month like I wasn't already working 50 hours a week. I owed her the truth. She didn't want it. There was a pause. Then Morgan's voice cracked. You're a coward. Maybe, I said. But I'm not the one who wore pearls to a funeral for a woman who lied to everyone in that room. I ended the call before she could reply. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger took energy. I had none left to give. Instead of sitting among black-clad mourners, I finished loading the last box into the U-Haul parked in the driveway. The new locks had been installed yesterday. I dropped the old keys into a manila envelope marked Return to Sender and left it in the mailbox, even though I knew no one would collect it. I didn't plan on ever giving anyone a forwarding address. In the garage, I placed a sleek black tablet into a padded case. It was already charged, already queued. I'd spent the night before scripting every second of what I was about to do. I wasn't interested in revenge. Not exactly. I just wanted to stop pretending. I wanted them all to know the truth Clarissa kept behind a smile, behind matching heels and designer sympathy. And more than that, I wanted Morgan to hear herself. The funeral was held at a small chapel Clarissa used to admire from the car. If I die before you, she once joked, don't bury me in some ugly place with bad lighting. I remember laughing, thinking the comment was just typical Clarissa flair. Now, I saw it differently. That wasn't a joke. It was another attempt at controlling her image, right to the end. I'd arranged the delivery 2 hours before the service. A courier. Neutral, forgettable. He dropped the tablet off at the chapel entrance with simple instructions. Play the file when prompted. From Felix. He didn't know what was on it. No one did but me. From my new apartment. Bare walls, unopened boxes, the echo of a life restarted. I opened my laptop and connected to the tablet using the venue's public Wi-Fi. The screen flickered once, then connected. On the other end, I saw the chapel. The casket was closed. Clarissa never wanted an open one. I imagine she hated the idea of being looked at when she couldn't curate her expression. The place was packed. A few neighbors. Her design friends. 2 cousins from Georgia. Morgan sat in the front row, dark sunglasses hiding her eyes, black dress cinched at the waist, like grief could be styled. A murmur rolled through the room when someone lifted the tablet. Morgan appeared on the screen, frowning, confused. "What is this?" she snapped. And then my voice played. "Hello, everyone," I began, calmly. "If you're hearing this, it means I chose not to attend the funeral of Clarissa Doyle, my wife, a woman I once loved, and a woman who, unfortunately, did not live the life many of you thought she did." Gasps. Awkward coughs. Morgan tried to mute the volume, but the file was locked. One setting. One volume. No escape. I continued. Clarissa died in a car accident on her way to meet her lover, Riley Trenton. For months, years, she deceived me, lied to her friends, mocked our marriage. I won't bore you with all the details, but I've shared some of them now. Images flashed across the screen. Screenshots. Text messages. The beachside reservation. A photo of Clarissa with Riley in a robe, wine glass in hand, dated 2 nights before her death. Gasps again. Someone said, "Oh my God." Someone else whispered, "Turn it off." But no one could. Then came the final clip. Morgan's voice. I'd trimmed the audio, kept the context. Her, at 18, recorded through the vent one night when she was on the phone with her boyfriend. "I don't care if he dies in his sleep. He's just a wallet with feet." The room froze. I watched Morgan's shoulders tense. She stood, eyes darting around, trying to find someone, anyone, to speak in her defense. But they were too busy listening. Then I spoke again. "I'm done. You're all free to mourn her however you choose. But I won't honor a lie. And Morgan, this was your final performance. Consider the curtain closed." I ended the feed. The tablet screen faded to black. And I sat in the quiet of my new home, finally free of the house I bought for someone who never stayed, the bills I paid for a woman who mocked me, and the daughter I never truly had, only tolerated. Let them talk. Let them whisper. I had nothing left to explain. For the first time in years, my silence was mine. I knew what I was doing when I recorded the message. I'd rehearsed it 6 times before the final version. Not because I doubted myself. No, I was past that. But because I wanted every word to land like a drop of ink on white linen. Unforgettable. Staining. True. There's a power in clarity. It doesn't shout. It whispers just loud enough to be undeniable. The chapel had gone silent after I ended the call. I watched it all unfold from a quiet room, 2 cities away. My laptop screen reflected the live stream Morgan didn't know was still active for another 3 minutes after the video ended. I'd set it to linger. I wanted to see the aftermath, not just create it. Morgan stood at the altar, frozen. She looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the heels. Or maybe she'd finally realized the weight of the curtain falling. Her sunglasses were off now, revealing eyes wide and blinking, unsure whether to cry or scream. Around her, the crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few people murmured. One woman covered her mouth and turned to the person beside her, shaking her head like she'd just seen a car wreck and didn't want to admit how close she'd been to riding in the passenger seat. Clarissa's cousin Carol, the one who always called me so reliable, got up and walked out. No one stopped her. 2 of Morgan's friends looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. The preacher stared down at his notes like they no longer meant anything, because they didn't. The narrative had shifted, and Morgan, who had spent years curating a version of our family built on pity and sarcasm, was suddenly standing inside a truth she couldn't control. She picked up the tablet and tried to slam it face down on the table, but it was already too late. My voice was in their ears. My evidence was in their hands. And her own words, carefully clipped, perfectly timed, were ringing in their memories. I shut my laptop and leaned back in the creaky armchair of my new apartment. The space was still mostly empty, just a couch, a desk, and the echo of possibility. I didn't need much. Not anymore. I'd lived surrounded by noise for too long. Lies layered on pleasantries, manipulation stitched into daily routines. I used to think survival meant silence. Now I knew better. Sometimes, survival means speaking the one sentence no one wants to hear. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Morgan. Again. I didn't pick up. Instead, I opened the voicemail transcriptions. The first was a scream disguised as a plea. "You vindictive piece of, how could you do that? In front of everyone?" The second was shorter, sharper. "You're going to pay for this." The third came later, softer. "You embarrassed me. I lost everything today. Are you happy now?" No, I thought. Not happy, but honest. I didn't delete the voicemails. I saved them, like I'd saved everything else. Because history has a habit of being rewritten by those who speak the loudest. And Morgan had always counted on her voice being the only one that mattered. She didn't know I had receipts, clips, emails. The kind of quiet truth that doesn't need to shout to be permanent. That night, I poured myself a glass of scotch, the one Clarissa said always smelled like varnish, and sat by the window with the city lights humming in the background. I didn't toast. I didn't smile. But I felt the tension leave my shoulders in waves. People talk about closure like it's a letter you write and burn. Something ceremonial. But closure, for me, came wrapped in Morgan's stunned silence and the absence of her mother's laugh echoing through my hallway. It came in the sound of the locks clicking behind me for the last time and the feel of a mattress I'd chosen alone. It came in the quiet confidence that no one would ever call me the help again, not in my own life, not in my own story. The next day, I received an email from Clarissa's design partner. Short, polite, almost rehearsed. "Felix, I saw the video. I just want you to know, I had no idea. Clarissa spoke so highly of you, publicly at least. I'm sorry, I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say." Later that afternoon, Morgan showed up at my old address. The neighbor across the street texted me. She was knocking hard, screaming for you. Told her you moved out. I could almost hear it. Her fists pounding the door, her voice cracking. Not because she missed her mother, but because I'd taken away her final illusion of power. The ability to paint herself as the innocent daughter, the victim of a cruel stepfather who abandoned her mother. That story no longer held. And she wasn't prepared for life without a script. She called again that night. I didn't pick up. She left a message, this time quiet. "You think this makes you better than her? It doesn't. You're just cruel in a different way. I don't know what you think you've won, but you've burned everything." Maybe she was right. Maybe it was fire. But sometimes fire isn't destruction, it's purification. And I'd been buried in smoke for too long. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without waking up wondering if my credit card had been used for another emergency. Without checking to see if the car was parked where I left it. Without feeling like I had to rehearse my tone before speaking in my own house. I slept like someone who no longer needed permission to breathe. The video didn't change everything. It just revealed what had already been broken. People didn't abandon Morgan because of what I showed them. They abandoned her because they saw what they'd always suspected but were too polite to name. She texted me the next morning. A photo of her and Clarissa, years ago. Her caption read, "You ruined the only family I had." I almost laughed. Because I didn't ruin anything. They did. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already ashes. She showed up a week later, as expected. Not for closure. Not to apologize. But for the one thing I knew would eventually drag her to my door, money. I heard the knock just after noon, sharp and persistent, the way someone knocks when they think they still have leverage. I didn't rush to open it. Let her wait. Let the sun beat down on her pride for a moment. When I finally opened the door, Morgan stood there in black jeans and a designer blouse, sunglasses perched high on her head, face set in a scowl that didn't quite mask the nerves underneath. She looked older, sharper around the edges than she had before the funeral. But her tone? That hadn't aged a day. "You've been ignoring my calls," she said, arms folded. "I know," I replied, holding the door but not stepping aside. "Why are you here?" She huffed, like it offended her to be questioned. "I need to talk to you. In private." I stepped back, just enough for her to enter. She walked in like she still owned something, eyes scanning the place like it had betrayed her. The boxes were mostly unpacked now. No pictures on the walls yet, but it was clean, quiet, mine. She noticed the change right away. "This place is smaller than the house." "It fits," I said. "I don't need more than this." She dropped onto the couch without asking. Typical. "I want to talk about the estate," she said. "There isn't one." She laughed, dry and mean. "Don't be stupid. Mom had savings. Investments. The house. Jewelry." I know she had life insurance. She didn't. Bullshit. I sat in the chair across from her, calm, deliberate. She didn't have a savings account in her name. Any retirement money she had, she drained for your tuition. She opened credit cards she couldn't pay off. The house? Transferred solely to me a year ago. Legally. Publicly. With her signature. And the only life insurance policy in our household was mine. You're lying, she snapped, voice rising. You're hiding something. I'm not. I kept my voice low, firm. And if you think otherwise, you're welcome to get a lawyer and find out. Her eyes narrowed. You're a monster. No, I said, leaning forward. I was a provider. For years. For you. For her. And all I got in return was debt, disrespect, and a daughter who couldn't even fake gratitude long enough to look me in the eye on my birthday. She stood up suddenly, pacing. You think you're punishing me, but you're just proving you were never family. That's the first honest thing you've said, I replied. We were never family. We were a transaction. And now the account is closed. She whirled to face me. She loved you, you know. I said nothing. She wasn't perfect, but she loved you. You abandoned her at the end. I exhaled through my nose. No, Morgan. She abandoned me long before the end. I just finally stopped begging her to notice. Her eyes darted toward the window. Maybe to avoid mine. Maybe to find something to throw. I couldn't tell. You can't just erase people, Felix. I didn't erase her. I survived her. She sat down again, quieter now. So that's it. No ring, no necklace, no letters. I shook my head. She didn't leave you anything. Then why the hell did she bother being a mother at all? That stopped me. For a moment, I saw it. Behind the hard shell and cruel mouth, a crack. A daughter still trying to believe she was loved by someone who never quite figured out how to give it cleanly. And as much as I wanted to hate her, I understood that ache. Clarissa was magnetic, but her love came with a price tag and Morgan had been paying since the crib. Maybe, I said softly, she didn't know how to give more than she took. Morgan stared at the coffee table, lips pressed tight. I covered her debts, I added. Quietly. After she died. I didn't want the creditors coming after you. Even after everything. Her head snapped up. Why? Because I'm not her. Silence hung between us, long and heavy. Then she said, I have nowhere to go. I'm sorry to hear that. You don't even care, do you? I cared for 8 years, Morgan. And every time I did, you made it a punishment. She stood again, clutching her purse like it was the last thing she had. You'll regret this. No, I said. I'll remember it. She marched to the door. But right before she opened it, she turned back, as if she hadn't gotten the last word she came for. You may have erased her, but she'll still haunt you. People don't just disappear. I nodded. She already did. Long before the car hit the guardrail. Morgan left without slamming the door. I didn't watch her walk to the car. I didn't check to see if she looked back. I just sat there for a while, letting the echo of her departure settle over the room like dust after a storm. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. The next day, I received an email from a small claims lawyer representing Morgan. It was thin, speculative, hoping for settlement. I forwarded it to my attorney, who responded with 2 sentences. No legal adoption. No documented dependency. No grounds. That was the last time she tried. Weeks passed. Autumn came. I started walking in the evenings, headphones in, podcasts on. I signed up to volunteer at a local library. I bought a plant. I cooked for myself without plating 2 dinners. I looked in the mirror and, for the first time in years, didn't see someone tired of his own reflection. Clarissa never really understood peace. She needed chaos to feel alive. Morgan inherited that. But me, I had learned to love the quiet. I wasn't afraid of it anymore. One afternoon, I opened the last box I hadn't touched yet. Inside was the letter I'd once written to Clarissa. Never sent. Never spoken. It started. If you ever wonder what I needed, it wasn't perfection. It was honesty. I folded it and slid it into a drawer. No burning. No dramatics. Just storage. Just memory. Because moving on didn't mean forgetting. It meant living without permission again. She didn't go quietly. I knew she wouldn't. Morgan never exited a room without slamming a door, even metaphorically. So when I served her the eviction notice, I expected drama. What I didn't expect was her clinging to legal straws like they could save her from the truth. You can't just throw me out, she snapped, standing in the middle of the foyer, one hand on her hip like she'd rehearsed the pose. You're my stepfather. You owe me support. A place to live. I stood across from her, calm, unmoved. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock, Clarissa's old find from an antique shop, back when she used to call anything with rust character. I was never your legal guardian, I said, voice even. Clarissa and I never filed any adoption paperwork. I have no obligation to you. You're 24, an adult. This isn't your home anymore. Her eyes widened, then narrowed just as fast. So that's it. You're just kicking me out like trash. No, I replied. I'm reclaiming space that never belonged to you. The notice had been signed, sealed, and delivered the day before. 30 days. That's what the law required. I gave her every one. But the real deadline had come and gone years ago when I bought her that car, when I sat through her graduation, when I sat in silence every time she called me wallet with feet. She tried to argue, of course. Cried to Clarissa's family. Showed up on her Aunt Liza's porch with crocodile tears and a sob story about the cold man who abandoned her. But by then, it didn't matter. I'd already mailed a secure flash drive to every family member who had ever judged me from the sidelines. On that drive was everything: Clarissa's messages, Morgan's audio clips, photos, credit statements, even a few receipts I thought were too subtle to be noticed, but necessary for the full picture. No one rushed to take Morgan's side. In fact, I heard from Liza 2 days after the delivery. You did the right thing, her voicemail said. Clarissa fooled us all. Don't let Morgan do the same. Even her uncle, the one who used to slap me on the back and call me brother, sent me a text that simply read, "She's got to face the consequences. Stay strong." Morgan came home later that week and found the locks changed. I'd waited until she was out, probably staying at a friend's, trying to rally sympathy to make the switch. I left a printed copy of the key clause from the eviction law on the door with my attorney's number in bold. When she called me, her voice shook with fury. "This is illegal. You can't just lock me out. You don't live here anymore," I said. "This was my mother's house." "No," I corrected. "It was mine. Legally, financially, strategically. Your mother never checked the paperwork when I refinanced and took her name off the deed. She was too busy planning weekend lies to care." "You're a coward," she spat. "No," I said. "I'm a man finally done being used." She hung up. The days that followed were quiet. Beautifully so. I moved through the house freely. No footsteps overhead at midnight. No empty wine glasses left on the kitchen counter. No passive-aggressive sticky notes asking me to pick up oat milk or not forget the basil this time. Just space. Light. Peace. Morgan didn't come back for 2 weeks. And when she did, she came with a borrowed car and a face that looked tired for the first time since I'd met her. She didn't yell. She didn't knock. She just stood in the driveway and waited until I noticed her through the window. I stepped outside. The air was crisp, early fall biting at the edges of the breeze. "I'm just here for my things," she said. "I boxed them up," I replied. "They're in the garage. Whatever didn't have your name on it stayed here." She followed me without a word. In the garage, a stack of neatly labeled boxes waited. Morgan, bedroom. Morgan, bathroom. Morgan, miscellaneous. I had packed every item carefully, not because I cared, but because I didn't want her to have an excuse to linger. She stood in silence for a moment, looking down at them. Then she said, "You know, for a long time I hated you. I know. I thought you were weak. Always cleaning up after Mom's messes. Always pretending like everything was okay. I was weak," I said, "but not anymore." She picked up the first box and carried it to the car. Then the next. No tears. No tantrums. Just quiet resentment. On the last trip, she paused at the garage door, hand on the handle. "I don't know how to be without her," she said. I didn't reply right away. Then I said, "Neither do I. But at least now I have a chance to try." She nodded, just once, then walked away. The trunk slammed. The engine started. And just like that, she was gone. I didn't watch her drive off. I went back inside and turned on the record player. Jazz. Something slow and without lyrics. The kind of music that fills the spaces between grief and relief. That night, I walked through the house barefoot, listening to the quiet creaks of hardwood under my step. No voices. No tension. No weight that didn't belong to me. The next morning, I called the real estate agent. "I'm ready to sell," I told her. "The market's good," she said. "You'll get a fair deal." "I'm not looking for fair," I replied. "I'm looking for done." Within a week, the house was listed. I scheduled cleaners, cleared the last of Clarissa's antiques, staged the place just enough to seem warm without memory. People came in, wide-eyed and complimentary. "It has good bones," one woman said. It did. It always had. But no one knew how much those bones had carried. When the offer came through, full asking price, cash buyer, I signed without hesitation. No emotion, no regret. Just a name on paper and a new beginning. I packed what little I cared to keep, shipped the rest, and left the keys with the agent. On my way out, I stood in the driveway and looked back once. Not at the windows, not at the yard, at the door. The same one Morgan had slammed so many times. It was still, closed, quiet, like me, like everything I'd finally chosen to leave behind. No haggling, no drawn-out negotiations. Just one offer, firm and fair, from a couple relocating from Arizona who said the light in the foyer made them feel like they could breathe. I smiled when I heard that. They didn't know how much that light used to lie, how it lit up rooms filled with tension and performance, how I used to stand beneath it in the early mornings wondering when, not if, I'd be discarded. Let them see it as a beacon. I didn't need to correct them. The story of that house no longer belonged to me. The equity, though, that was mine. Every cent Clarissa's name had come off the deed long before her death, quietly and legally. She'd signed the forms without reading them, distracted by a weekend trip she claimed was work-related. That was Clarissa, never concerned with the details unless they had her name printed in bold gold letters. I never told her I changed the paperwork. At the time, it wasn't revenge. It was survival. I used the money to relocate, not to a bigger city. Those days were behind me, but to a smaller town just outside Charleston. Clean streets, quiet mornings, grocery clerks who remember your name. I rented a modest townhouse with hardwood floors and a screened porch that overlooked a patch of woods. It was the first time in years I moved somewhere without asking someone else what color the drapes should be or if the kitchen had enough entertaining space. I wasn't entertaining anymore. I was living. I changed jobs, too. Left the tech consulting firm that had drained 10 hours a day out of me in exchange for a smaller, local outfit. The pay was less, but the hours were kind, and the people knew how to laugh without hidden agendas. My boss called me Felix instead of Mr. Doyle, and no one rolled their eyes when I talked about quiet hobbies or old jazz records. It took a while to adjust to the calm. Still does sometimes. I started volunteering at the library twice a week. Cataloging, stocking, helping older folks with the computer terminals. One woman, Mrs. Appleby, asked if I had grandchildren. I laughed and told her no. "Well, you carry yourself like a grandfather," she said, wise and weathered. I didn't tell her that my only real experience with children was with a young woman who used my credit cards and mocked me behind closed doors. That part of my life didn't need to follow me here. It had no place in these shelves filled with new beginnings. I made friends. Slowly. Honestly. A neighbor named Daryl who loves to fish but hates to eat them. A woman named June who runs a second-hand shop and always tucks a cookie into my purchases just because. These weren't transactional connections. They didn't ask about my past, and I didn't offer it. I showed up as I was, and for the first time, that was enough. Sometimes, late at night, I still wonder what would have happened if Clarissa hadn't taken that road. If she'd come home from that fake conference and found the locks changed, the silence waiting, would she have fought to stay? Apologized? Or just packed her bags and found another Riley? I'll never know. And I don't lose sleep over it. Her death didn't just close a door. It revealed that the door had always been a wall I kept knocking on, hoping for an invitation that was never coming. Morgan tried to reach out once more. A text. Just one. "I don't know where else to go. Sky needs stability. He's 7. We've been sleeping in a friend's basement. I'm not asking for money. Just help." I read it 3 times. Sky. I'd forgotten she had a son. Clarissa used to post pictures of him like he was a grand achievement. "Our little legacy," she'd say, even though I'd never been asked to babysit, never attended a birthday, never been introduced as anything more than my mom's husband. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond. Not because of Morgan. Because of the boy. 7 was an age where the world still felt like it could be repaired with a hug or a steady hand. I thought about it. I really did. And then I blocked the number. I didn't know Morgan Clarity. I didn't know her my peace. And Sky, God help me, Sky would be better off with someone who knew how to show up for real, not someone waiting for a man she never respected to rescue her from her own decisions. I didn't create the storm. I just stopped standing in it. Sometimes people say grief is a tether, that you carry it like a stone in your pocket. But I think there's another kind. The kind where you grieve the version of yourself you became just to be loved. That's the kind that sits in your chest for years. And when you finally let it go, you don't cry. You exhale. I exhaled the day I deleted Clarissa's name from my emergency contact list. I exhaled when I gave away the last piece of her jewelry to a donation box and didn't flinch. I exhaled when I introduced myself to someone new and didn't hear the echo of old lies in the background. My life now isn't glamorous. I wake up early. I drink my coffee without having to justify the brand or the roast. I take walks. I pay bills without someone else's chaos dripping from every due date. I don't have family dinners or anniversary plans. But I also don't have secrets being whispered in hotel rooms or insults wrapped in forced laughter. I don't have a wife, but I have peace. I don't have a daughter, but I have dignity. And for the first time in a long, long time, I have myself. Clarissa didn't get a burial from me. She got distance. She got the truth. Because in the end, she didn't just die in that car crash. She died in the lies she layered across our marriage. And I didn't bury her, because she buried me first. But I clawed my way back, inch by inch, word by word. And now, I live quietly, alone, but whole.